Hello everyone, I'm Tony, and I'm here to show you some of the cut content from the Old Switcheroo, providing some developer commentary along the way. Don't worry, you aren't required to listen to me blab through all the music. All of these songs, including the songs played during the intro and outro, will be uploaded tomorrow. Additionally, assuming I figured out how it works, I'll be including the music on its own as a separate audio track, most likely listed under Klingon until YouTube makes audio tracks language non-specific. The first section of this song should be familiar to everyone who's listened to the Old Switcheroo's soundtrack. What you may not have expected is that originally this song used to maintain a very traditional Once Upon a Time-esque format. This version used leitmotifs such as Faint Courage or the second half of Darkness Falls, Don't Forget, as well as sneaking in a little bit of Gaster's theme. This version had been scrapped for quite some time before Rise and Fall was finally made. I realized early on that I wanted the B and C sections to cover an advertisement and the adventure that follows, but I was still trying to figure out how exactly I wanted that to sound. In fact, it seems the final version was made 4 days before the video went up, while the wonderful aesthetic put together the visual assets for the video. This song was originally meant to serve the purpose of your average menu theme, and it's actually still the basis for the version we have today, as at around 3 minutes and 30 seconds into the songs are instrumentally identical, though this version is a little faster than the current version. This and the next song were originally made from the standpoint of necessity, to provide an analog to every song in Undertale's soundtrack. These songs consist of an original melody specifically composed for them. These were scrapped early on in favor of the day-night cycle themes, though their original purpose remained the same, initially being used as the joystick configuration screen themes. But rather than being seasonally dependent, the song that would play would be dependent on the time of day. There was supposed to be a third Woah song to replace So Heats, but the idea was ditched long before I'd reached that part of the soundtrack. This is a previous rendition of the Determination replacement. This one was mainly scrapped because it felt a little too cheery for a game over theme, and I wasn't really liking how much the song leaned on Fallen Down's instrumentation. This is a very old rendition of Papyrus's theme, part of the first batch of songs I'd worked on way back in 2021. If the file folder structure is anything to go by the time I'd gone through the soundtrack a second time to touch up on the songs I'd made originally, and this was still in 2021, this was the only song I'd redone entirely, or at least significantly enough to warrant backing up the FLP between rounds 1 and 2. Before Slider, the dog bass replacement used to serve a purpose much more similar to what it does in Undertale. The main difference between this and Strange Area is the composition. This is once again just a case of me feeling as though it didn't fit what I'd have in mind for it. This is another case of a song being updated rather soon before its intended release date. Originally, the memory replacement was meant to play at some sort of memorial statue for Dr. Gaster, but I realized first of all that I wanted it to be a tribute to Vess, and that I wanted the song and the accompanying dialogue and context to be a lot less clear as to who it was meant to be for, leading to fun theories like the Azrael replacement being Noelle, Kara, or Ralsei. This version, of course, is pretty heavily inspired and uses the leitmotif from man.ogg. This theme used to be a lot more explicitly tied to the Ruins dummy in terms of the leitmotifs featured, though the main reason this version was scrapped is actually because of its usage of Quiet Waters chords and instrumentation, as I'd mainly reserved that for a fresh coat of paint. The current version instead takes a lot more notes from Waterfall, helping make the swap between the associated areas a lot more clear, even if in execution the songs are still very much their own thing as well. This is an old version of Lightning Round, as hopefully clearly indicated by some on-screen text that displays the titles of the songs as we go through them. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. This was pretty much just scrapped because I didn't think it was chaotic enough for what it was meant to be. If I may break the fourth wall here, I just have to acknowledge the fact that in the original script I wrote for this, I described the differences between this and the final version of Mysterious Dog Park as though they were night and day. when all I really did between the two versions was make it slower and add drums. I'm honestly unsure if I was kidding or being genuine. I always wanted the analog to the Metaton Resort to swap with the analog to Alphys's lab in terms of when they show up. The original premise for the ohhh replacement was that, somewhat inspired by Core Approach, you'd hear Napstablook's banger from outside the club before hearing it more clearly once inside. This ended up being scrapped in favor of using a different song to apply this approach to, just as a result of Blook Club appearing a bit later. This song, while being a bit slower and having some differences with its instrumentation, is not too different from the canon version. The most noteworthy difference here, actually, is that the original motif here, usually listed as the clinic or waiting room, is a lot more deliberately based on Homestuck's Doctor. I'm glad that I changed that grating lead instrument for the final version. This and the next song were made at a point in time where I had very little idea what I was doing with Napstablook. I knew I wanted them to be a magician, and that I wanted them to be overwhelmed by the end of the fight as a result of all the weird antics they kept putting Chris and themselves through, and that they'd keep trying to one-up themselves, which sounds like I actually know a lot of things, but there was still a lot of foundational context missing here. This song was also made by the time I was missing a lot of important details for Napstablook. This may have ended up being the basis for my next trick. I originally intended for this, or an update to it, to serve the purpose of the For the Fans replacement as it was handled in the Old Switcheroo, but I eventually decided that reprising with the stars was a lot cooler and more fitting. The context for this song was exactly the same as it is today. The song itself is perfectly functional for that context, but I ended up wanting the song to much more closely resemble Ruins and an ending compositionally than this version did. Contrary to the previous song, while the context for this song was also exactly the same as it is today, this song was not at all that fitting for what I wanted it to do. This was actually made really early on in the creation process of the soundtrack, and got scrapped in favor of something I feel is a lot more fitting. I do still really like how this sounds. It's very calming and very peaceful, which was unfortunately more than certainly its downfall here. Him originally took a slightly more traditional approach with soul breaks and everything, all revolving around Toriel and freeing her from Dr. Gaster's grasp. While still sounding very different, I believe the soul breaks ended up being a big source of inspiration for how I handled her. This one holds a special place in my heart. This was the 5th song I made for the project long before a lot of things had been figured out or finalized in any capacity. One thing I knew from the moment I conceptualized things, though, is that Dr. Gaster's final form would be him finally back to the way he used to be, before being shattered across space and time. I used to miss that this version was canon, and maybe a part of me still does, a little bit, but I know in my heart that the disassembly of completion is far, far superior. One of the big plans I had for the Old Switcheroo, before realizing it didn't really make as much sense as I was hoping it did, was for Dr. Gaster to be the final boss of the Merciless route. Papyrus would have still taken on the same role he does, and his theme would have likely sounded somewhat similar to Misbelief, if not a bit shorter and slightly less emotional. This song was, at a point in time, the answer to giving Papyrus his own Megalovania, and it remains unfinished due to no longer being needed. That's all the cut content from the Old Switcheroo that I felt was worth showing off. I hope you all enjoyed getting a glimpse into my creative process. I hope you enjoyed listening to these older versions of the songs that we have now. If you like this sort of video, do let me know, because I had a lot of fun putting this together. I don't have an outro.